Skyline Stories official. The rain hammered against the glass walls of the corporate tower, turning the city below into a blur of lights and shadows. Inside, the annual executive gala of Black Ridge Aviation sparkled with wealth, power, and quiet arrogance. Crystal glasses clinked, polished shoes glided across marble floors, and conversations floated in the air like carefully measured currency. At the center of it all stood Vanessa Clark, the young and fiercely ambitious CEO whose rise to the top had become the talk of the industry. She carried herself with effortless authority, every gesture precise, every word sharp, every smile calculated. Near the edge of the room, unnoticed by most, a janitor quietly moved his mop across the glossy floor. His uniform was simple, slightly worn, his posture humble. His name was Daniel Hayes, and to everyone present, he was just another invisible worker blending into the background of privilege. Yet his eyes, calm, observant, almost detached, took in everything. He watched the executives laugh too loudly, the investors whisper deals, and Vanessa command attention without ever raising her voice. Vanessa spotted him when a small puddle near the entrance caught her attention. Her heels clicked sharply as she approached, irritation flickering across her face. "You missed a spot," she said coldly, not even looking directly at him at first. Daniel nodded quietly and moved to fix it, his movement steady and unhurried. Something about his calm demeanor seemed to irritate her even more, as if his silence challenged her authority in a way she couldn't quite explain. A group of executives nearby began to watch, sensing entertainment. Vanessa, feeling their eyes, let her sharp wit take over. She crossed her arms and glanced toward the large glass windows overlooking the company's private helipad. A sleek helicopter sat there, gleaming under the city lights, a symbol of power, speed, and status. With a mocking smile, she gestured toward it and said loudly, "Tell you what, fly that helicopter, and I'll marry you." Laughter erupted around them, echoing through the hall. Daniel paused for a brief second, then looked at her, not with anger, not with embarrassment, but with something deeper, something almost unreadable. He gave a small nod, as if acknowledging a challenge rather than an insult. Without another word, he placed the mop aside and calmly walked toward the exit. The laughter grew louder, people shaking their heads, some even placing bets on how far he would get before being stopped by security. Minutes later, the laughter began to fade as a low mechanical hum filled the air. Heads turned toward the glass walls, confusion spreading like wildfire. The helicopter's blades began to spin, slowly at first, then faster, slicing through the rain-soaked night. Gasps replaced laughter. Vanessa's confident expression faltered for the first time that evening as she stepped closer to the window, her heart pounding in disbelief. The helicopter lifted smoothly into the air, steady and controlled, as if guided by an expert hand. It circled once around the building, lights cutting through the darkness like a silent declaration. Inside the cabin, Daniel sat composed, his hands moving with precision, his eyes focused with the ease of someone who had done this countless times before. There was no hesitation, no fear, only mastery. Inside the gala, silence had taken over. The executives who had laughed moments ago now stared in stunned disbelief. Vanessa felt something unfamiliar creeping into her chest, uncertainty. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile the image of the quiet janitor with the undeniable skill unfolding before her eyes. Who was he? How was this even possible? The helicopter descended gracefully and landed back on the helipad. Moments later, the doors opened and Daniel walked back inside, his uniform unchanged, his expression just as calm as before. The room seemed to hold its breath as he approached Vanessa. No one laughed now. No one whispered. Every eye was fixed on the man they had dismissed just minutes earlier. He stopped in front of her, meeting her gaze with quiet confidence. "I believe you said something about marriage," he said softly, his voice steady but not arrogant. Vanessa stood speechless, her carefully constructed world suddenly cracked by a truth she hadn't expected. In that moment, she realized she hadn't just underestimated a man, she had completely failed to see him at all. Vanessa opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time in years, she felt completely unprepared, as if the ground beneath her certainty had shifted without warning. The room remained silent, every executive waiting for her reaction, but her confidence, once unshakable, now wavered under the weight of what she had just witnessed. She straightened her posture, attempting to regain control. "Who are you?" she finally asked, her voice quieter than before, stripped of its usual edge. It wasn't a question of authority anymore, it was genuine curiosity, mixed with disbelief. Daniel studied her expression for a brief moment, as if deciding how much truth she was ready to hear. "My name is Daniel Hayes," he replied calmly. "And I used to fly helicopters like that, every day." His words were simple, but they carried a depth that immediately shifted the energy in the room. A murmur spread among the guests, curiosity replacing judgment as people leaned in, eager to understand the story behind the man standing before them. Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in focus. "Used to," she pressed. There was something in his tone, something unfinished, something hidden. Daniel glanced briefly toward the glass windows, where the helicopter now sat still again, as if it had never left the ground. "I was a test pilot," he said, his voice steady. "Black Ridge Aviation. Before you became CEO." The words hit her like a sudden jolt. She knew that name. She knew the records. And she knew exactly what had happened to the company's former test pilot team, a restructuring, a silent cost-cutting decision made years ago, buried under reports and signatures. Her expression shifted, realization slowly creeping in. "You were part of the program we shut down," she said, almost to herself. Daniel nodded once, not accusing, not bitter, just stating a fact that had long been accepted. "After that, things changed," he added. "For the company, and for me." The weight of his words settled heavily in the room. Vanessa felt an unexpected wave of discomfort. She had always viewed her decisions as strategic, necessary, part of leadership. But standing in front of her now was the human side of those decisions, a man whose life had been quietly altered while she climbed higher. "Why didn't you say anything?" she asked, her voice softer now. Daniel gave a faint, almost amused smile. "Would it have mattered?" he replied. The question lingered between them, sharp and undeniable. Vanessa had no immediate answer, and for the first time, silence worked against her instead of for her. The executives around them shifted uneasily. The power dynamic had changed, and everyone could feel it. The janitor was no longer invisible, and the CEO was no longer untouchable. Vanessa took a slow breath, her mind racing, but this time not to maintain control, to understand. "I made a joke," she said finally, her voice carrying a rare hint of humility. "A careless one." Daniel shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "You revealed what you believed." His words were not harsh, but they were honest, and that honesty struck deeper than any accusation could have. Vanessa looked at him differently now, not as an employee, not as a mistake, but as a mirror reflecting something she had long ignored. The room, once filled with power and pride, now felt smaller, quieter, more real. And in that moment, she realized that success without awareness had blinded her more than failure ever could. The next morning, the phrase, "Fly this helicopter and I'll marry you," echoed across every corner of Black Ridge Aviation, no longer as a joke, but as a symbol of a moment that had exposed something deeper within the company. Employees whispered about it in hallways, replaying the scene in their minds, each version carrying more weight than the last. For Vanessa Clark, however, it was not just a story, it had become a turning point she could not ignore. She sat alone in her office, staring at the city below, the same view that once made her feel invincible. But today, it felt different. The reflection of the night before lingered in her thoughts. Daniel Hayes, the janitor who wasn't just a janitor, the man she had underestimated so completely. The memory of her own words, "Fly this helicopter and I'll marry you," now felt heavier than any business decision she had ever made. Determined to understand more, Vanessa requested a full internal report on Daniel. What she received was far from ordinary. His records were minimal in the company system, but external references painted a different picture: elite training, high-risk missions, private contracts, and a reputation that spoke of precision and bravery. It was clear now, Daniel had not fallen from success, he had stepped away from it. Meanwhile, Daniel continued his work as if nothing had changed. He moved through the building with the same calm presence, cleaning floors, fixing small issues, and avoiding unnecessary attention. But now, people looked at him differently. The same executives who had laughed now greeted him with cautious respect. Still, Daniel did not seek recognition, he carried himself as someone who had already seen enough of the world to not need validation. Vanessa eventually found him in the maintenance corridor, away from the polished surfaces and executive floors. For a moment, she hesitated, something she rarely did. Then she stepped forward. "We need to talk," she said, her tone no longer commanding, but sincere. Daniel looked up, meeting her gaze without hesitation, and nodded. They moved to a quieter room, away from curious eyes. Vanessa didn't waste time. "That night, what I said, 'Fly this helicopter and I'll marry you,' I didn't realize how much it revealed about me." Her voice carried honesty, stripped of pride. Daniel listened, silent but attentive, allowing her to speak without interruption. "I built this company believing strength meant control," she continued. "But you showed me something else, that real strength can be quiet and invisible." Her words hung in the air, not as an apology alone, but as an admission of a deeper flaw she had never acknowledged before. Daniel finally spoke, his voice steady. "People often see what they expect to see," he said. "You saw a janitor. That's not wrong, it's just incomplete." He paused briefly, then added, "But leadership isn't about seeing titles. It's about seeing people." His words were simple, yet they carried the weight of experience. Vanessa absorbed every word, realizing that this conversation mattered more than any deal she had ever negotiated. "Then help me fix it," she said quietly. "Not just for me, for the company." It was not a demand, but a request, something rare for someone in her position. Daniel studied her for a moment, as if measuring her sincerity. Then he gave a small nod. "Change doesn't happen in one moment," he replied. "But it can start with one." And in that moment, the story that began with a mocking line, "Fly this helicopter and I'll marry you," was no longer about humiliation or surprise. It had become the beginning of transformation, not just for Vanessa, but for everyone.